All right, let's kick things off with a question that sounds simple but is, well, it's anything but. Who are you really?
I mean, really think about it for a second. Your personality, what you like, what you believe in, how much of that is genuinely you? And how much of it is, a reflection of the world you live in? Most of us like to believe we're the captains of our own ship, right? The authors of our own story. Our identity feels so personal, so internal, like it comes from this unique, unchanging core deep inside us.
But what if I told you that from the very moment you were born, you've been shaped and guided by all these unseen forces, things you probably don't even notice day to day?
And no, this isn't some conspiracy theory. It's just how society works.
This all feeds into that age-old debate, right? Nature versus nurture. Sure, our genes give us a kind of starting blueprint, but it's our experiences, the nurture part of the equation, that really build the person we see in the mirror. And you know what the biggest architect in that whole process is? Society.
Okay, so how exactly does this all happen? Well, sociologists have a name for it, and it's a really key concept for understanding all this. It's called socialization.
So, what is socialization? Put simply, it's the lifelong process of learning the rules of the game. And I'm not just talking about, learning which fork to use. It's about absorbing your culture's deepest values, its beliefs, its entire way of seeing the world, until they feel like they're totally your own.
There's this fantastic quote from the sociologist Charles Horton Cooley that just nails this idea. He called it the looking glass self. Basically, he's saying we figure out who we are based on how we think other people see us. It's like we're constantly trying to see our own reflection in the eyes of everyone around us. Kind of a mind bender, right?
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does this whole shaping process actually work? We can trace it all the way from when we're kids to, well, right now.
Okay, so it really happens in two big waves. First, you have what's called primary socialization. This is your family, your home life. It lays the absolute foundation for your values and attitudes. Then, as you get older, you hit secondary socialization. That's school, your friends, your first job, all these smaller groups where you learn to adapt and play by a new set of rules.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It's not like the same environment just stamps out identical people. Not at all. And to show you what I mean, let's look at this really powerful story from the psychologist Lev Vygotsky. It's about 3 siblings who all grew up in the exact same, very difficult home.
So you had the youngest child. For him, the world was just terrifying. He was completely overwhelmed, and his way of coping was to retreat inward. He actually developed a stammer and had these awful attacks of terror. It was his way of defending himself from a world he just couldn't control.
Then there was the second child. His experience created this deep, painful conflict inside him. He developed what psychologists call a mother-witch complex, where you both love and are terrified of the same person. Imagine that, living in that constant state of inner turmoil.
And what about the eldest? Well, his survival strategy was totally different. He became the adult in the room. He developed this precocious maturity, basically becoming the caretaker to protect the other two. And in doing so, he pretty much lost his own childhood.
So think about that. 3 kids, the exact same toxic home, but 3 completely different ways of surviving. This is the crucial point, right here. It proves that it's not just the situation that shapes us, it's how we emotionally experience that situation. That's what really forges who we become.
Now, for most of human history, the main things that socialized us were our family, our school, our community. But what happens when the most powerful socializing force in your life isn't a person at all? What happens when it's an algorithm?
This is where we get into something called persuasive technology. See, social media platforms aren't just neutral tools like a hammer or a spreadsheet. No, they are specifically, intentionally designed to influence our attitudes and, our behaviors.
And how do they do it? Well, it's a whole toolbox of techniques. You've got the personalized content feeds that know exactly what you want to see, the constant notifications pulling you back in, the slick, interactive designs, and of course, the big one, that infinite scroll that never, ever ends. The goal for all of this is simple: maximize your engagement. And in the process, they're socializing us into totally new ways of behaving.
But as you can probably guess, this new, super powerful form of socialization, it comes with a price tag. And that price is often paid by the most vulnerable people in our society.
In fact, the risks are so serious that back in May of 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General issued an official public advisory. He warned about the profound, that was his word, profound risk that social media poses to the mental health of kids and teenagers.
And the sheer scale of this is, well, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. A survey from 2022 found that American teens, on average, spend about 8.2 hours a day on social media. Let that sink in. 8.2 hours. That is literally more time than they spend in a school day.
So where is all that time going? Well, the big players are the platforms built around these super engaging, algorithm-driven video feeds. YouTube is at the top of the list, with about 77% of teens using it daily. And right behind it, you've got TikTok and Instagram, both grabbing the attention of more than half of all teens every single day.
All of this has led to a brand new and pretty unhealthy behavior that you've probably heard of: doom scrolling. You know the feeling, right? You're just mindlessly scrolling through your feed, not even really looking for anything. It's often a habit born out of anxiety, and it creates this vicious cycle where you see more negative stuff, which makes you more anxious, which makes you scroll even more.
So the big question is, are we just stuck? Are we at the mercy of these algorithms? Well, not necessarily. There are things we can do. We can actually work to rewrite the social code.
So what does a path forward look like? Well, it seems to be a kind of a three-part strategy. First, we need to strengthen legislation and actually enforce it. Second, we have to start teaching digital wellness in schools, making it a core part of education. And third, and this is a big one, we need to start seriously exploring different models for how our online communities are built.
And that really comes down to two very different ways of thinking about social media. On one side, you have the model we're all familiar with, the centralized one. Think Meta. It's owned by one giant corporation, and its main goal is to maximize engagement to make money. But on the other side, you have these decentralized models, like Mastodon. They're not owned by anyone. They're made up of a bunch of independent communities. Their goal isn't engagement, it's communication. Now look, they have their own set of challenges for sure, especially with things like moderation, but they represent a fundamentally different way of doing things.
And that brings us right back to where we started. The truth is, we can't escape socialization. It's just part of what makes us human. Our families, our culture, and yeah, now our algorithms, they all have a hand in writing the first draft of who we are. So the real question isn't whether we're being shaped. It's this: now that you know, how are you going to pick up the pen and start editing your own story?